And now it is my pleasure to turn over the podium to Julia Taylor, President of the Greater Milwaukee Committee, and Beth Wyrick, CEO of Milwaukee Downtown. The GMC and Milwaukee Downtown commissioned the study we will soon hear about, and they will lead things off by telling us why they did so and what they hope to gain from the analysis.
Well, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be up here with Beth Wyrick, my good friend and partner in what's been an 8-month work. So we're pleased to present this today. We've got a once-in-a-generation opportunity with all the new development that's happening downtown. We've got the streetcar, the arena that's being proposed, the lakefront gateway, major headquartered office buildings going up. We have almost $5 billion in built under development and proposed development. This development will change our city and the way it functions. So this timely report is an outgrowth of the GMC's continuing work with Bid 21 as a next step from Bid 21's last report that looked at the downtown economy and how do we increase its vibrancy. So as you'll learn from our conversation today, the Hunden and Associates report has a couple of major focuses, including one on connectivity. Our entertainment districts and our neighborhoods are spread out, which is creating issues of density and connectivity. The streetcar and the additional forms of transit we know are going to be an important answer, but not the only answer in ensuring all the connectivity and growth that we need. I wanted to talk just for a few minutes about what's going to happen after the report. We know that there's a huge demographic shift going on with people moving back to the heart of the city. It's a national phenomenon. We're seeing increased housing. We're seeing new workforce due to the new office buildings downtown, and that's all critical to creating the density that we need. But there's an opportunity and an obligation for us as leaders to do what we can to mold the city as it moves forward. How can the city grow and pursue downtown economic development while preserving the character and growing the prosperity of its neighborhoods and enhancing the quality of its transit systems and its open spaces? These are big questions to consider. The Greater Milwaukee Committee recently organized the Downtown Task Force in recognition that this is a dramatic time of growth in our city. Our task force focus extends way beyond real estate development. It's about vision. We want to think beyond the development while acknowledging it is a key catalyst in shaping the landscape in Milwaukee. While the focus is on growth of downtown, the vision of the Downtown Task Force will connect the immediate and the long-term needs of our neighborhoods to both downtown growth and job opportunities. We've got strong neighborhood associations. We all work with them. They work through our city to strengthen our neighborhoods 24/7, but the one commonality of all is the need for more jobs for neighborhood residents. So the task force will look at more effective ways to partner with the neighborhood associations to link the downtown development to jobs for residents, whether it's an office building or a construction site. And we've had a great model with Northwestern Mutual and the work you're doing, so thank you, Kevin. The task force is really about the evolution of the city, including civic and infrastructure projects. It's inclusive, public, private, education, and nonprofit, and we have a strong engagement of the mayor and the other elected officials. We've got 4 concrete actionable items that have been identified that will be coming forth shortly from the work of the task force. Define a vision and plan for Milwaukee's downtown connected to the neighborhoods. This will be the foundation of the task force work. We'll utilize existing information from the current city plans and development groups and other reports, like the one that we're here to discuss today. We'll identify immediate actions around the arena, streetcar, and lake bed boundary, and research what's happening with other urban development plans around the country. Longer term, we're going to look at what's the growth of residential opportunities downtown, our cultural and performing arts and entertainment assets, the continuation of growth in transit options, downtown retail, supporting our parks and lakefront infrastructure and employment models. We need a balanced growth in the city, and downtown should be the engine, but it has to connect to our entire community and our neighborhood. There will be a shared vision coming out of this and a timeline, and there will be a how and how we get things done. But there will also be a broad community input process. As Jane Jacobs wisely noted one time, the cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they are created by everybody. So you'll have a chance to you'll hear more in depth about the Hunden report, have a chance to look at it. It's going to be available both on the Bid 21 and the GMC website. So now let me introduce Beth Wyrick, President of Bid 21.
Thanks, Julia. I'll keep my remarks brief so that we can get to the meat of the program today with Rob Hunden. I just want to say I think it's phenomenal, the opportunities that we have in this community. Some may view this as we're not matching up to our peer aspirational cities, but what I view this as is a sheer opportunity for all of the believers in this room to continue to collaborate and take your energy and move the city forward, as opposed to taking that energy and focusing on all the things that are going wrong. So there are true leaders in this room that we collaborate with. I want to take the opportunity to thank Easttown, Westtown, and the historic Third Ward for their ongoing leadership, fabulous leadership within the city of Milwaukee. I know we have Alderman Kovac and Alderman Bauman here today. Thank you so very much. But with that, again, we are all challenged to take this report, take these findings, take what all of us in this room know, that Milwaukee is truly a city that is on the brink of takeoff. I think we're midair already. One of the great quotes that I like to just reference is Gallup and Knight did a study about the soul of the community that was conducted several years ago. And one of the key findings out of that study is that social offerings are those things that connect people to community. That connection out there, all of these opportunities that we're talking about today. And it is about investment at every level, financial, emotional, civic investment. So let's dig deep. I'm very excited that I have the opportunity to introduce to you today Rob Hunden. Rob and his firm offer extensive experience in the economics of major real estate projects. Rob has provided economic development advisory, finance, economic impact, and planning expertise for over 300 projects over the past 20 years, which resulted in more than $3 billion in built projects, including entertainment districts, convention and conference centers, convention and boutique hotels, major and minor sports leagues facilities, cultural entertainment facilities, master plans, youth sports complexes, and other destination developments, including distilleries, aquariums, racetracks, theme parks, and caves. Prior to HSP, Hunden Strategic Partners, in 2006, Rob worked for Johnson Consulting, Lender & Associates, and Grubb & Ellis. He also had a stint in the private sector. He managed projects for the Indianapolis Bond Bank, and he also worked for the Indianapolis Mayor's Office. Rob is a member of the International Society of Hospitality Consultants, ULI, IEDC, IDA, IAVM, and there will be a test on those. What do we call those? I forget. Well, nonetheless. He also sits on advisory board for the DePaul's School of Hospitality and Indiana University's Real Estate Club. He has written articles on convention hotel development, conducted IEDC, panel discussions, and taught numerous professional development courses. So I know myself that Rob has been cited as a professional and an expert in many, many publications, but it has been a real pleasure to have the opportunity the last 8 months to work with Rob, and I'm excited to introduce him to you today. Let's give him a warm Milwaukee welcome.
Thank you so much, Beth, and to everyone here. I should probably rewrite that intro because that's going to be hard to live up to. But yeah, really glad to be here and so glad that you are all here today. I know this is, we have a very short time frame, and I've been told that there is a large hook so that if I go over time that I will be given that hook. So I'm going to get right to it because I know we have a panel discussion and there's a lot to discuss. Big picture, we were asked to look at a variety of questions as part of this process, and we're not getting into all of the details of those questions today. The real catalytic question was, how does downtown Milwaukee stack up, not in terms of office space or residential per se, but some of the other live, work, play, fun things to do, the nighttime entertainment economy, hotels, restaurants, bars, things that people say, oh, that makes it a fun place to live, work, and play. So we measured a variety of things and presented those in the report. And what we said is essentially we were looking generally at the supply of these things, not necessarily the demand, how well those have performed, whether it's hotels or the convention center, those sorts of things, but just in general, what do you offer versus what do your peers offer? And one thing that I'll say just big picture is, and just echoing the introductory comments, is that there is this headlong rush into downtowns by millennials, by people of my generation, by empty nesters. And if you haven't traveled around much, you maybe not know that there are communities much smaller than you and much larger that are all experiencing this. So it's not just big cities, it's just not medium-sized cities. We go to cities of 30,000, 50,000, 150,000 people where you will be blown away by what's taking place, what's transforming these communities. So while downtown Milwaukee has certainly, started to reinvigorate, what pace are you doing that at relative to your peers out there? So I think that's what we're looking at. And so this, I think, gives you a little bit of a benchmark, and then we can come back year after year and say, okay, how are we doing? How are we stacking up? I think that would be really interesting, over the years to take these same aspirational peer cities and say, okay, how are things changing and growing? So we looked at the convention center, hotel package, restaurants, theaters, sports facilities. And when one of the things that you can't really measure with just statistics, but how do all these things lay out? Because a lot of cities have, every city pretty much has a downtown, right? But how they lay out and how they interact is super critical. And you can say, well, how come we built this arena, but the whole neighborhood around it didn't explode with activity? Well, maybe they built 4 blank walls, right, around the arena, and so they just shut themselves off, and it was a very insular situation. Same thing with a casino or whatever. You could have that occur. But then you go to other downtowns, and you have all this sort of interactive integration of restaurants, bars, the glue that kind of sticks everything together before and after events so that people can walk from their office to get a cocktail, to get an appetizer, and then go to the Pabst or whatever. So, do you have all that glue that sticks it together, and where is that? So we looked at a lot of locational things that I won't get to show you all the maps. I really wanted to, because we did a ton of cool maps that are in the study that show you how all these peer cities lay out and where their nodes are. So it's about numbers, but it's also super locational in how it impacts you. And we also looked at transit. I know that's been a big conversation recently. So just to let you know that we could have chosen about 36 peer cities, because there are many cities that, I'm from Indianapolis. There are many cities around that size of 1.5 million to, say, 2.5 million people, have major professional sports teams and that sort of thing. We picked kind of a cross-section that we felt had either professional sports teams, were aspirational and growing in some way. We tried not to pick any that were really had a lot of negative population growth over the last 10 or 20 years, like Cleveland and Detroit. So we did our best, and the idea was, let's just see how you all stack up, and so here's the list, right? And big picture population-wise, you're a little smaller than the average of these, but in terms of the downtown, your downtown daytime and residential population is actually pretty good, right in the middle there. You have 25,000 downtown residents, and downtown employment is over 80,000, and so that's right in the middle of the groups. So I'll give you the big picture, and then we'll get into some specifics. So in terms of, we looked at all these things kind of going across, and I'm not sure if you can read all these. It's pretty small, so I'll bust through them pretty quickly. So convention center size, you have the smallest convention center of the group. The largest is Indianapolis. The walkable quality hotel package, walkable, we measured about 1,500 linear feet from the front door of the convention center. You're the second from the bottom. Indianapolis is at the top. Portland is also near the bottom, and they're trying to address that with a new convention hotel now. Your average in terms of your largest convention hotel, the biggest ones are in St. Louis and Indianapolis, and the lowest is Cincinnati. Cincinnati's had a long struggle with hotels. Interesting boutique hotels. We added this as a category because one of the things that we noticed was that despite the fact that maybe the sheer numbers of rooms and where they're located and do you have these big box convention hotels? Maybe wasn't measuring up to the group. You have a lot of really cool, interesting hotels, many that have been rehabbed older buildings that we've stayed in and that we've toured. And I think one of the great things about Milwaukee is you have this really cool urban fabric that, if retained and reinvested in, you can have these really neat hotels and restaurants and experiences and not just knock everything down and start from scratch. So I think you're to be congratulated for all the rehabilitation that you've done with these older buildings. Inexpensive restaurants, we found that, at least according to the measurement that we used, Milwaukee had the least. We'll get into that. Portland has the most, but they have a zillion food trucks. So if you take that out, actually Salt Lake City and Baltimore and Portland are right around the top. Upscale restaurants, you're right in the middle. Portland and Baltimore had the most and St. Louis the least. Transit connectivity, obviously this is a big topic. It's a big deal for the millennial generation. Everybody wants to apparently not have a car. I'm not one of those people. I certainly get why that people would like that. And it makes sense because people want a walkable environment. They want to be able to live, work, and play in one place. Well, so places like where I'm from, Indianapolis, don't have it. Milwaukee has struggled with that too. Places like Portland, one of your aspirational cities, I would say, in this grouping, has a killer. How many people have been to Portland downtown? And thumbs up on the rapid transit and the downtown transit. It's pretty impressive. The walkability to most nodes of activity, we put you right in the middle. Indianapolis, St. Louis, and Nashville were the most walkable in terms of their activity clusters, and then the most spread out were Portland and Kansas City, but Portland mitigates that with their excellent transit. Stage theater and concert seats, non-arena, you actually have the highest of the group, and they even asked us to include Chicago so you could see how awesome you are even compared to Chicago. You have about half the number of ticketed theater seats as Chicago, which is pretty impressive. So that's something to build on, and I think you'll hear from our panel that when you look at the demand side, that's actually improved over the years in terms of the number of tickets sold and how active the bookings are. So entertainment nodes proximity is average, and sports venues and seats is below average. One thing that maybe is a third rail here, but we'll just come out and say it. We would never, if we were asked, would you put something that generates 50 or 40 or 90 events a year outside of downtown because you can get cheaper free land versus downtown, and it's a little harder, but it's going to help invigorate the neighborhood in downtown, we'd say go downtown every day of the week. You didn't do that with the Brewers. We hope you don't make that same mistake. We don't think you will with the Bucks. So, but that's going to be part of the conversation. So we talked about the headlines, so I'm going to just kind of go right through that and get into the convention center comparison. So again, we didn't look at, how busy is the convention center, how well is it run, managed, marketed, and that sort of thing. But if you look at just the numbers, Milwaukee is at the bottom, it is highlighted below the group, and so the total function space average for the group approaches 500,000 square feet, and you're basically at half of that. And then when you break down the exhibit square footage, the ballroom square footage, the meeting room square footage, and the number of meeting rooms, and the largest ballroom, the only metric where you're at the average is with the largest ballroom. Everything else, you're about half the size of your competitors. And this is a very competitive business, and it's become even more and more competitive over the years, and it was something that cities felt like, boy, if we just build a convention center, that's going to solve a lot of things. And because everybody had that same idea at the same time, somewhat like youth sports complexes now, everybody's doing that, thinking it's going to generate a ton of room nights. And it does for a while for the ones that kind of take the leadership role in that. But if everybody's doing that, then the supply overwhelms the demand, and so then you really have to fight for it. So these days, unless you have this perfect package of a ton of walkable hotel rooms, of an exciting restaurant and entertainment environment within walkability of all those hotels in the convention center, it's tough to win at that game. So you have to make a choice. Are you going to invest in this building, in this business, or are you not? I will say, again, just using an example of Indianapolis, which has almost zero corporate headquarters and has struggled a long time, and then just said, you know, we're going to make conventions kind of our thing and events. They get actually 75% of their downtown hotel room demand from conventions and events, which is really scary and exciting at the same time for them, because if they screw it up, their hotels will tank. You won't see a major city with that sort of imbalance anywhere else, because they just can't rely on, they just don't have a big corporate sector there, and they certainly don't have a lot of vacationers going to Indianapolis. So, but it also shows what a smaller city can do, and St. Louis and a lot of other cities are trying to do the same thing. So what this table shows you is the convention hotel package. One of the things we know from meeting planners is they want to know what's the walkable package of hotel rooms within, say, about 1,500 square feet. So that's about 3, 4, 5 blocks, depending on how big your blocks are. And what we find is that Milwaukee, unfortunately, has a walkable room count of about 2,000 rooms, and just to be average with the group, that it would have to be twice as big, almost as that. And so it's not that you don't necessarily have the hotel rooms, because you do. You're still a little bit short on that, but it's that they're not necessarily all in close proximity to the convention center. So that makes it harder for these meeting planners to package up a group of hotels that they need. Having a large headquarters hotel helps to solve that. You have one, but you could use others, or at least one other. The other thing that we look at, though, is the metric of hotel rooms to exhibit square footage at the convention center. Because if you have a small convention center like you do, why would you have, you know, tons of hotel rooms if they're not supporting each other? So that's one of the things we found, is that today you're probably about 400 rooms short minimum to supporting your existing convention center size. But if you expand that convention center, then you'll really need to look at a game changer in terms of a large hotel. And let's look at that on the map around the Wisconsin Center, and you can see that, you know, basically, you know, you can see all the hotels that are sort of in orange there, and a lot of them are outside of that walkable radius. So it's just a challenge, and it's something to be mindful of, is that where you build things matters, and everything real estate is location, location, location. And so you just absolutely have to be considering these things and building from a strong core when you make these decisions. We also showed you the largest walkable quality convention hotel for all the major cities, or all the comparable cities, the peer cities. And you can see there that you're about 100 rooms smaller than the average. These days, everybody's trying to have the 1,000-room hotel. 3 of the cities have that. Kansas City has been trying for 10 years to get a hotel. They just announced last week a deal for an 800-room Hyatt right by the convention center just south of it. So they're finally getting on board. Portland just is doing the same thing. So everybody's starting to come around to that, but it just makes the stakes that much higher and harder for you if you're going to be in this business. Now, the other thing that we alluded to in the report, and we didn't hit it super hard, but and I'll say this in general about downtowns, is that the private sector can be leaders, right, in downtown development, but downtown development is never cheap, nor easy or uncomplicated, compared especially to the suburbs. So the public sector has to provide that leadership, because the private sector has a lot of options. There are plenty of cities out there saying, hey, we'll help you do this, that, and the other, and if Milwaukee's not open arms like that and saying, hey, we've got a deal, we can put together these deals to help make this happen, then you know what, developers are going to go to the next city down the road that's going to do that, because there are a lot of cities out there that are willing to step forward and show that leadership. So All these cities that have made it happen, the public leadership has really stepped forward. Here's the mix of hotel types. We told you had some really cool hotels and a nice mix, and that is absolutely true. You can have a really great experience in a lot of different hotels here, and so that's I think, really fantastic for Milwaukee. So we talked about the implications of the convention center and the hotel situation. Now let's move on to the restaurants. So the number of restaurants here is lower than most, and you do have a number of decent independent foodie options, but the critical mass and the strong clusters and nodes are lacking. And, you know, it may just be a matter of time before you just start building on the existing positives that you have. So this is sort of a graphic, well, in fact, it is a graphic, that shows you, people love to use the non sequitur sort of all the time, right? Here we have Milwaukee on the left, and we have everybody else to the right. You'll see Portland with their food trucks certainly dominate on the low end, but even in terms of total downtown restaurants, and this does not include bars and lounges that don't serve food. So that's a separate category. So if you wanted to know, just pure restaurants, then you're at basically 100, and most of the others in the group are more like around 150. So, you know, one of the questions I think was from people starting the study, are we maxed out? Like, do we have too much for what our population can support? And what we say is, in terms of certain things, is that more is more, right? When you cluster restaurants together, as an example, you get more people saying, hey, that's a place to go. So let's go, instead of saying, oh, I want to go to Elsa's, right? That's a very specific go-to place. They'll say, oh, let's go down to the historic Third Ward, and we'll figure it out, right? Well, you can only say that if you know that there are probably 5 or more options there. So those, what we're starting to identify is that you need more of those nodes that have a bunch of different options, because then everybody participates in that. Okay, so I got 3 minutes. So we're just going to bust through it. We're getting closer. Okay, comparing ticketed theaters. I told you this is where you score well, so we're not going to spend a ton of time on it, and I know that Gary can. So we'll move through that, but you're doing very well on that. Comparing sports seats, we talked about that. And in terms of arenas, you got a lot of arena seats, and you don't have a lot of stadium seats. And obviously getting the Bucks deal done is going to be a big deal, and so I have this cool graphic that shows you that since 1980, almost every year on average, a major pro sports team has moved from one place to another because they couldn't get a deal done on their stadium. So let's look at the proximity of demand generators to what we call fun clusters. Okay, so we talked about that walkability, and the average distance of the entertainment districts in the other cities averaged about 1/3 of a mile, which is within that radius, but you can see somewhere a little outside of that. Most of your clusters or a good number of your clusters are outside of that walkable radius from your major demand generators like the convention center and arena. This is a really interesting graphic that shows you where people take pictures on Flickr. The red is tourists, the blue is locals, the yellow is both. And it shows you that people stick to a pretty specific track, and what you want to do is make it so comfortable for people to walk around that those red lines spread out. So we looked at this for Milwaukee just in terms of, let's just look at the dots of where the different restaurants are, national chains, independent, high, low cost, all that, and see how spread out they are or clustered. And ultimately, you'd love to have them all spread out, but so robust that it was easy to walk between. But here we see that it's fairly spread out. And then we overlaid on top of it some of the other things happening downtown. So there you see that most of those are outside that walkable radius. We did the same thing with Baltimore and the other cities, which I won't show you, but you can see how they're much more clustered and within that walkable radius. We did the same thing in Charlotte, and they have light rail now, and you can see how clustered they are within that walkable radius, most of them. And then Indianapolis has 2 nodes in the corners, but they've started to connect them, but almost everything is connected and within walkability right within the convention center area. And then finally we'll do Kansas City, and I think we're going to get to the end because I know the hook is coming. And look at Portland. Now see that big gap there? That's called the river. So they solved for that with their light rail. And look at the convention center. It's not even on the same side of the river as downtown. So they've had to struggle. So the implications for Arena are, you got a big decision to make. Let's just promote the idea that that thing needs to be as integrated and activating to the rest of the neighborhood around it as possible, so that everybody participates in the activity and we don't have people just getting in their cars and going home. And then public transit, you're to be congratulated on starting that conversation and getting a streetcar going, and we wish you the best of success on that. Those are never easy and they always take a lot of work, but I think that the convenience and the frequency of that is going to help people understand that that's a true investment in downtown. So with that, I think I got through the last 30 slides in 30 seconds, so there you go.
Thanks, Rob.
Yep.
I always hate to have to do that, but Rob could probably speak for another couple hours. The report is really fascinating and long, but that's not bad. I am Mark Sablejack, publisher of the Business Journal, and it's my pleasure to moderate this panel. Stage right, everyone. Why don't we get the panelists up here? Julia Taylor mentioned that we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, or once-in-a-generational opportunity. I think it's really more than that. I think what is about to happen in the downtown will have impact on many generations to come, geographically many areas, and not just the downtown. I think we have an opportunity to impact our central city, our suburbs, and if we do this right, the state and the Midwest in particular. Come on up, gang. Turn your microphones on. Now that we've received the National Consultant Report, it's time for some local input. These four individuals will have an impact on what happens, and I want to explain the empty chair. It was for Peter Fagan, president of the Milwaukee Bucks. He has a very good reason for not being here. He's in Madison at the behest of the governor, and I think he is taking care of business there. But let me introduce the panel very quickly. Eve Hall is president and CEO of the African American Chamber of Commerce. Rocky Marcoux is Milwaukee's commissioner of the Department of City Development. Greg Marcus, president and chief executive officer of the Marcus Corporation. He baked the bread today. And Gary Witt is CEO of the Pabst Theater Group, multifaceted entertainment organization. We're going to start with Eve, and to get the ball rolling, we've asked each of the panelists to give us, in 2 minutes, good luck, their impression of the Hunden report.
I thought it was very, can everyone hear me? I am on. Okay. Very concise. I definitely agreed with the observation. I'm with Beth around where we are in this city. There's so much opportunity, and it is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to grow this city to the... You can't hear me. I'm on.
Just move it up. Yeah.
How's that? Wonders what zipping something up can do, right? All right, let's take that the right way.
Yeah, sorry, Eve. Come on, Eve, keep talking.
I know. That was one way to break the silence and the seriousness in this room. Again, the report was very concise. It definitely reflected where we are, I believe, in this city. I look at our city as a place where the glass is half full, not half empty, and looking at the opportunity and the potential for us to go to the next level in this region and in this country. I talk often to our young people who are the millennials and others who are in this city both as residents and newbies. And they're very excited, but I will say that they're carefully watching the momentum in this city and making decisions as we go along as to whether they'd like to stay.
Great. Gary.
I actually spent the weekend reading the entire report, which is really exciting for me for a whole weekend. So, but my takeaway from it was that it was a fascinating capture of data, and we love data. capturing data that's really meaningful for the city in comparisons. But I was also a bit taken aback by the fact that it was kind of dry. And I find a great difference in reality, based upon, let's say you'll see the report, and there's a celebration of a number of theater seats or concert venue seats which we were made to look better by having more theater seats. But if you all would have done this report in 2001 before we opened our business, this report would have revealed the exact same number of theater seats. And I think that somewhat we're missing kind of the connectivity of how we operate things versus how we build things. Building things isn't really enough. If you look at the comparison, I drove into town on the very first day I came to town, I looked to my left and the Milwaukee Theater was being built. I think if you look at the comparison between our growth and what we've done with our organization and what sadly has happened with the Milwaukee Theater and U.S. Cellular, you can tell it's a difference between how you build things and how you operate things. And my challenge would be that if we focus this way on the arena and look at that, I don't want to wake up 10 years from now and find myself having an arena or an entertainment zone that's operated in the same way that, for example, the Milwaukee Theater is and U.S. Cellular is, or that type of an area. I think that I'm hopefully here to make mention of the fact that I would like to see more accountability in those governmental areas where we build things in the city and we don't just randomly lose money annually because we're falling on the cross of doing something good. I think everything has to be held to a higher standard of accountability, and we'll all succeed because of that.
Great.
I thought it was a good report, and it was a good snapshot of what's going on. And I think that Rob really highlighted some of the issues of connectivity that are a challenge for us. He alluded to a few things. I think that there could have been a few things that may have broadened it out a little bit. For example, he spoke about an imbalance in Indianapolis in a reliance on convention center and convention center business. I'd argue that actually Milwaukee has a bit of an imbalance, and it's really thankfully to Gary and people who are running our entertainment destinations. If you look at Milwaukee by any metric and you take the hotel rooms, and it had a very heavy hotel room focus, and I'm sitting up here proud because of the hotel room stuff, so I'll just dive right in. So, if you look at the metrics and you look at, and it's important, he's right, you need to look at walkability. That's a challenge for us. We need to expand our convention center. He's right about that. And we need more rooms right near the convention center. I'm going to come back to that in a second. But you can't ignore the fact that there's a lot of rooms in downtown beyond the walkability. It talks to what is our vision and what is our strategy. We've had a lot of hotel rooms pop up not near the convention center. And I'd ask Rocky and challenge the city, what can you do from a zoning perspective so that we have a vision that says, we need more rooms? And Rob basically said, I'm not looking at financial feasibility. Well, I wish I had that luxury. I have to look at financial feasibility. And we have a significant investment downtown. And so, every new hotel room they build on the east side of the river makes it all that much harder. And the bigger the subsidy you're going to have to show up with to build more hotel rooms on the west side. And maybe you're prepared for that, and I guess I'll have to live with that. But, I asked, what can the city do to make that happen? And, so we have on the metric of convention center space to hotel rooms in general, and as the report points out, the report talks about, we have a very short window for convention center activity, really, because we've got these very tough winters. It's not the most appealing place in the middle of January, I've noticed. So we have, but yet those hotel rooms don't go away. They're here 365. And so we have to be fiscally and financially feasible all year round. And we compete against the rooms that are east of the river. I promise you that Hilton is competing against the Marriott in January. And so we have to be thoughtful about how we do that. And I wish the report would have addressed that a little bit more. The report also doesn't talk about, here's another metric that we need to know about. Hotel rooms per square foot of office space. We're number 2 in our peer city. We've done this math. Number 2 compared to peer cities in hotel rooms downtown compared to our office space. So, we need more office space. We need more people. We need more conventioners. We need the demand generators, which I've been harping on. And the convention center is just one of those. And we need to expand it. We need to expand it. And the report doesn't talk, I don't remember too much about this, but about the reason for expanding it is, if nothing else, if we have 4 to 5, 6 months of decent where we can live, where we attract the conventions, the ability to double up. Right now, we can't have one convention coming in, another one leaving. If we could do that, we could make the space much more efficient. And I'm here to tell you right now, as for new hotel rooms, the Hilton can be expanded. We are prepared to expand the Hilton by up to, I think, 200 or even a little bit more to get us close to that 1,000-room magic number. We also have an empty water park, which we haven't invested in because we don't know what's going to happen with the convention center. That, and combined with what a new tower we would build, would give us 45,000 feet of breakout space, which the report says we need. So we can give you and the community that very efficiently. And it says we need 800 rooms or something. I think with what's going to happen at the arena, and we add the rooms, we can get the rooms we need. But we have to be thoughtful about how we do it.
Rocky.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to the sponsors, certainly the Greater Milwaukee Committee and clearly Bid 21, who's done some incredibly outstanding work. Thank you for everybody in the room that's here. I look around and it's like everybody in this room is involved. And I also want to mention that I know Beth talked about Alderman Kovac and Alderman Bauman being here, but the Common Council President is also with us, Michael Murphy. And his leadership has been extraordinary in terms of moving things forward, and his leadership will be very much needed as we continue to look at some of the things that the report talks about, or you can read in any of the news outlets today. I would only differ, and I like the report, first of all. I'm not going to say I agree with everything in the report, but overall, I think Rob did a tremendous job of outlining a lot of the strengths of our great city. I was sure that Greg would have some comments on hotels, which is always insightful. I love my conversations with Greg on hotels. I think what's interesting, though, just to take Greg's point for a moment, some of these boutique hotels have been very impactful in the neighborhoods where they are actually built, or in the case of renovation. Ambassador's a good point. Okay, a lot of people don't consider that a downtown hotel. I do, because I see Wisconsin Avenue as a downtown hotel, or downtown premise, obviously. That Flickr graphic was very interesting, wasn't it? It actually said what we've been saying all along, that Wisconsin Avenue is a major arterial, and it's interesting that the people that actually use this city, that are coming in, the people who took those pictures, agree with that. So I think that's really good, and probably we'll talk a little bit more about that later. All right, so I will stick to the 2 minutes. I'll say one thing. Aspirational, I like that term. It's a term that I use a lot, but I would say that in regards to these other cities, I think we are without peer. I think we are at a unique situation right now because of everything that's on our plate. And whether we go in the right direction or not is totally dependent on certainly political leadership, but also everybody in this room in the private sector. We are at a very enviable point. Nobody that has come before us in this city has had the same amount of ability to influence the next 50 to 75 years of our city's growth. And despite the fact that what Rob has said is accurate, if you look at the census data, cities across the United States, large and small, are growing in population because people are trying to move back to the urban center. But it doesn't mean that everybody's a winner, because there are going to be losers in this as well. And we need to make sure that Milwaukee is not only the winner, but the definition of what a winner was in the 21st century when they write the reports to see what happened with that great millennial migration, what happened with the baby boomers returning downtown, what happened when cities took on big issues and made things happen.
Okay, second question. I'll throw this open to anybody who wants to address it. The Hunden report cites as an important challenge Milwaukee's undersized convention center. Why has the potential need for the Wisconsin Center expansion not received the same attention here, particularly when compared to the arena, the streetcar, and even the downtown cultural institutions? Go ahead, Greg. You blinked.
Well, I think I would probably be getting up and cheerleading it a lot louder, but I think for me, two reasons. One is we got to get the arena. The arena thing is taking center stage, and we need to get the focus and get that finished. But then the convention center, along with a whole package of demand generators, really needs to be taken. And we know my philosophy. If you've been listening to me long enough, it's about trying to figure out how to do them all at once. I have to admit, as the streetcar fight was ending, I'm thinking, okay, great. I guess my next one's going to be the convention center. And so I made my remark the other day in the paper. I said, the Business Journal, I said, well, I would like to just have one fight. And the convention center should be a part of it. But we have to figure out how to do it. But I think mainly the main reason has been it's been a timing issue. But it's coming. I'll be the first one to tell you we have to do it, along with a litany of other things. We're not competitive.
Eve?
Well, I would say sports is such a high-level and visible attraction that's what sometimes just takes over our vision right now. And we know that if we do not emphasize the fact that we need our team here, we need to build the arena, that less that, everything else to a certain degree is going to be very challenged. I mean, that to me is kind of that centerpiece that will also have the impact on the conventions and other entertainment that will come to the city.
So being realistic, the only way that we're even having a conversation about the arena is because we got a gun put to our head that said the team was going to leave in 2017. So where's the gun for the convention center? I mean, if that's what it takes for us as a community and for us as a state to react, I mean, this is what we have to look at. We got a gun put to our head. The team's going to leave in 2017 unless we do something. Therefore, we reacted. And quite frankly, the convention center is almost invisible at best because their impact on the city is minimal. When we were all here a few years ago and we had Lion King playing and we had the Northwestern Mutual Convention downtown, I actually had to wait at stoplights when there were people walking from place to place. But to be honest, the Bead and Button Show, older ladies who come to the convention, which is their second highest attending convention, just doesn't drive people into your restaurants. It doesn't drive people out into your places of business downtown. So, I mean, our convention business, I mean, let's be honest, we lost Wizard World to Madison. What's the size of Madison's convention center? I mean, if we lose Wizard World to Madison, what are we doing? I mean, I just don't see the impact of the convention center downtown, and I want it to be better because I want our city to be better, and we deserve that.
Rocky.
I think that timing is a big piece of it, and the location of the arena had to really dictate a lot of things. Now, the location has been chosen for the arena. We have to get the arena across the finish line, clearly. But I think if you look at our goal of making sure that we have a vital Wisconsin Avenue, West Wisconsin Avenue in particular, but all of Wisconsin Avenue, you look at where you draw that connectivity. 4th Street, of course, is the preeminent street that's going to connect all of that. It's the only one that goes through. And so that's something, and Bob's shaking his head, Bob Mondet, because he's made that point in presentations about making sure we get that access done correctly. I think whatever happens at the convention center has to be part of that strategy. But to a piece that was in the report, and I think someone may have mentioned it already, we also have to make sure that the arena is done correctly, that it isn't just 4 walls that look onto an inward vision. It has to have an external vision. It has to embrace the Park East and Bronzeville to its north, and it has to embrace the river, and it has to look towards Wisconsin Avenue in a way, as to borrow the phrase of the phraseology of the report, you talk about knitting this fabric of the community back together, but it's vitally important because we cannot leave Wisconsin Avenue behind. We absolutely cannot. Yet we could use a convention, and I'm not going to speak to the addition itself, but just the fact of the area along Kilbourne, which was once one of our great civic spaces, it needs to have new life breathed into it on an east-west and a north-south, with, I think, 4th Street being important. So I think the convention center is going to be important, but it's not the topic that needs to be discussed right now, as we kind of need to really solidify that arena discussion and what the balance of that looks like around the arena.
See, one of the problems that I have with that is that expanding the convention center and then growing the arena where it's going to be going, where it's placed, and where it's going to be expanding into the Park East, you still have this Game of Thrones style wall of pain that exists between where the convention center is and where the new arena is, and that's called U.S. Cellular and Milwaukee Theater. I mean, those things act as like this horrible barrier between the two activities of what's happening there, and it's simply, if you believe in the study that Rob has done, that separates the nodes dramatically, and it creates a lack of connectivity between the two areas. So no matter what you do at the convention center and no matter what they do at the arena, if you don't fix the problem with what you have with U.S. Cellular and with the Milwaukee Theater, then you've failed in both areas.
Well, I think that reinforces my point about 4th Street and 6th Street. And if you look at the downtown plan, the 2010 revision, which most people in the room are familiar with because you helped us to get there, a lot of these pieces are talked about in there, and particularly the connectivity that we have to have by the transit system. I mean, it was spoken well in the report, and clearly we're coming off, to your point, maybe we're coming off a fight. Well, they're all fights. If it was easy, it'd be done already. And you can't just say, here's the global plan, and here's X number of $500 million, and we're going to get it done on the public side. It has to be done on an incremental basis, but within the context of that larger plan. And I think you're right. You can't ignore those buildings. I mean, you're talking about management and other things. I'm looking at it just from an age standpoint of those buildings and how they present to what's around them. I mean, there's not a lot of visual activity there.
So, Rocky, do we need those two buildings? Do we need our old arena, and do we need the Milwaukee Theater, or would demolishing those two buildings, demolishing the Bradley Center, and figuring out what goes on in between, the Game of Thrones style, like that, Gary? Do we need those buildings?
I think we need to have the discussion about how those buildings fit into the overall strategy.
You know, I think in 1967, City Hall did a report stating that we should tear down the Pabst Theater and move City Hall over to the Pabst was. So I wouldn't trust the study that you guys would put together for anything, because I think it's not about, to be honest, it's not at all about the building. It has nothing to do with that whatsoever. I mean, we have a horrible track record in the city. Look at what we've got. We've got Grand Avenue Mall. We've got the Milwaukee Theater. You have U.S. Cellular. You've got the Convention Center. And they're all kind of like failing entities. I mean, really, if anything, everyone in governmental world should like leave their hands off of all those things and figure out some way to create some kind of a public-private combination to operate it. Because I guarantee you that everyone that works for the Marcoux Corporation has a different motivation to succeed than everybody that works in a governmental entity. I mean, this is something we have to confront in our city overall, because accountability is what allows Greg to be successful in his business. And I'm sorry, but I mean, we lack accountability in those areas, and we need to be able to. There's millions of dollars flowing into those businesses. We need to be able to be more accountable with where that money's going and what it's creating. And on top of that, if we look at how Visit Milwaukee is funded, it's an archaic funding device that eventually will lower as the debt increases the Milwaukee Theater. In Chicago, they had a budget of $35 million for their convention center, and they went out and found an additional $25 million. One of our challenges for Visit Milwaukee to succeed should be to go out and find additional funding, not resting on their laurels, and find a way to market and advertise us as a city. I have to wake up every day and look out my window at the Pabst at an advertisement for Denver advertising Red Rocks. I'm pretty pissed about that.
Can I ask just one question, going back to one thing? You made a point, Rock. You just said, well, we can't do everything at once. It must be incremental. I don't understand. I don't understand that. Why do we have to do that? Why can't we develop a big package of things to do and vote on it once every 8 years? There are other cities that do that. I mean, the amount of time that we waste bickering, that we could really be spending on trying to figure out all the things that Gary's highlighting, is just wasted time. It's great. It's great for Mark. Sells a lot of newspapers. It's great for politicians because they need donations to keep, because we got to take care of the politicians. But, I mean, really?
Well, I guess I'm not understanding exactly your question, but let me go to some general response. It's any public contribution is coming from somewhere, right? It's coming from the taxpayers. And I think we've recognized that the connectivity piece was huge. That's why we pushed the streetcar. And it's not an individual battle. That was a big battle. That connects a lot of the disconnected pieces that, whether it's this report or even our downtown plan 2010, actually talks about having to have that streetcar to bring our spread out downtown together. Now, we've just put a significant amount of resources into that. We're going to put a significant amount of public resources, most likely from state and from the county and from the city, into any potential arena package if it's going to happen. Those are big asks. We also have big asks out in the larger community. We have 600,000 folks, in this city. And there are a lot of issues that we're addressing in the neighborhoods as well. But when you talk about the politics of it, I think part of what we talked about during the streetcar debate was 3% of the central business district, 3% of the city's land mass is the central business district, produces about 18% of the city's overall tax base. So what we've said is we've got to continue to invest in the downtown. And these investments, Northwestern Mutual, huge investment. You talked about driving more offices. I think we lent a big hand to a great corporate partner. We're having discussions with other corporate partners. The Lakefront Gateway Interchange, which has completely changed the whole lakefront and made, quite frankly, one site that could be a potential major corporate site available. Those are things that we have been leveraging with city dollars. And I think it does operate. All of those things, once again, are in the context of that larger downtown plan revision. I think if you want the Oklahoma City model, I think we've had discussions around that. The trip I took with you to Oklahoma City was very insightful. I think that would take a huge amount of lifting on the part of the entire community to say that we want to do it. We've had some of that discussion. You see where the pushback has been on new taxes outside the city, taxes that maybe other entities are responsible for instituting or allowing us to have. So it is a much bigger discussion than us just deciding, here's what we're going to do in the city.
Eve.
And are we really building on our assets? You know, once again, we're going back, I think, oftentimes to what we don't have. So, Gary, you mentioned the fact about the theaters not always having the attention, but you also mentioned, like Lion King. That was a huge attraction here in this city. There were a lot of attendees. I would say, as we're moving forward, let's look at what do we have. When we have successful programs, when we have successful events, what has made them successful, and how can we increase? The connectivity is huge. There are a lot of people in the city that don't even feel like they're part of this discussion. I mean, that's another issue in itself. And so I look at how are we really promoting what we're doing amongst, again, the young professionals, people of color who are in the city who are making many decisions. How do we build, just constantly build on the assets? We don't need to get rid of our theaters. I mean, again, that is something that has been a strength of ours. But I would say, and I'm part of this, is we're trying to promote more and more what is occurring in our city.
Gary, I'm going to flip to you on this one. According to the report, we compare very favorably to our peers when it comes to state and concert venues and capacity. Report suggests we should be doing more to promote and cross-promote those venues. Gary first, and the others to chime in. Is there a bigger audience out there for downtown music and theater seats, and should we be beefing up our promotional activities, and if so, to where, and why aren't they coming now?
Well, you know, we succeeded with what we do because we never set out to solely sell tickets. We set out to build a community instead. And it's the reason why we send out 52 million emails a year, and I apologize if you all get like 50 million of them, but it's the reason why we send out 52 million emails a year. It's the reason why we have 49,000 people within the zip codes circular of the Milwaukee database and 180,000. So, you know, should we be promoting it more? Well, my challenge to that would be that the mayor gave Visit Milwaukee the responsibility to be the marketing agent for the city, but he didn't follow through with giving them a budget to market it. So, I mean, I guess my first question would be like, why don't we have any money to market our city? My next question would probably be like, we should probably hire someone who's capable of marketing our city would be a good idea as well. Do I think that we should use it? Do I think that we should use it as a tool to be able to sell the city? Yeah, but I think we should be able to use the lakefront as a tool to be able to market the city. I think we should be able to use Reggie Baylor as a tool to market the city. I mean, there's so many great things that our city has. I think we should use Downer Avenue because I live there and it's awesome to be able to market the city. So there's a lot of great things to do, but I mean, I don't really, you know, I think we have to have a better plan. We have to have a better strategic effort to compete. I love to compete, and competition in those areas is what makes us better. But again, the lack of accountability in how we market or how we sell what we do leads us to be fairly mediocre.
Anybody else want to chime in on the downtown music and theater and the promotion and the opportunity?
I guess I realized I didn't finish my thought on sort of what the imbalance was, because we can promote it better, I agree with you, but the imbalance that we have. I mean, looking at our hotel market, you'd say, okay, so we don't have enough convention space. We don't have enough office space given the amount of hotel rooms we have, and yet our hotel market's okay. Is it great? No, it's not great. It's okay. If you look at the rest of the world, a lot of the cities nationwide, the measurement of revenue increases are up 7-8%. We're up about 3.5% downtown. So we're not keeping up, but it's not terrible. So I ask myself, why is that? I think it's because of the lakefront, because of the arts, because of all those things that we've invested in or just got naturally. But that's an imbalance. That's the imbalance that Rob was talking about that Indy has on conventions. The good thing is we don't have to worry about conventions moving. The lake, I think, is going to stay.
Gary.
I also think it's wrong to, I'm glad that we get a lot of the credit for thinking of the success that we've created in our business, and we've grown from 300,000 to 20 million this year. Those are all awesome things, but it's wrong to credit us with that success overall. What everyone, including like my friends across the street who, in City Hall, you should be really looking at us as the example of what actually is happening in the city. We're like a highlighter. The fact that people are resonating and responding to the things that we do simply highlights the fact that the city's operating at a much higher level and it's succeeding. It's much less about me or my group than it is about everyone in this room and what you've created for the city. We do what we do because we're enabled and because the city has grown and it's at that level. We're a very, very visible piece of what tells you that the city is succeeding, and it tells you that we need to work harder to succeed in those other areas as well.
Does the African American Chamber see what's happening downtown or what's potentially happening as an opportunity, Eve?
Absolutely. It's interesting when we decided as a board and organization to move our organization to the downtown area. There was some pushback saying, well, we really need to stay in the community. But that was also a message that oftentimes the community doesn't see themselves as part of downtown. But in actuality, we now have black businesses that are beginning to pop up in the downtown area. So we see opportunity more and more for African Americans. We represent 40% of the city, $3.5 billion in annual income. And so we are consumers, and we do have opportunities to build the city. So we see that there's opportunities for us.
If the arena gets built, it's presumed or it's hoped that it creates opportunity around it. That didn't necessarily happen with the Bradley Center, as we can see from the revolving restaurants across the street from it. What will make it different? What will have to be done to make a new arena truly a magnet for that area? Rocky, why don't you start with that?
Well, it's good planning, and that's what we've been involved with the Bucks and with our partners, particularly at the county as well. I mean, remember when the Bradley Center was built, it was a building, right? Was never sold as a concept, and what was in its backyard? A freeway. There was a freeway there. Okay, now we all talk about the freeway is not there anymore, but there was a freeway there when the Bradley Center was built. And we absolutely have to have a much different approach this time. And the renderings, I think, do give you a good view of what beacon it could be, all right, if done correctly. But beyond the rendering, you have to get down to what happens at the street level. We have to have restaurants that spill out onto the street and bars and other retail that actually engages the street and that creates an expanse where people can walk and feel comfortable. Report talks about distances, and Rob brings up distances that people feel comfortable going venue to venue. Those were missing in the current, obviously, not just the Bradley Center, but as Gary has pointed out, it's missing on the other two buildings as well. You have this massive space. It's kind of a no person's land. I think the civic space, the live space, if you want to call it, around the commons could be very important as a gathering space because it doesn't just talk about what's going on inside that building. It really makes it real for a lot of people, including some people who may not be able to afford, quite frankly, to pay the price of admission in the building, could have a very public and very good experience in our downtown, just coming downtown and being part of that. You saw that most recently with Kansas City Live and what they did when the Royals were successful in their pennant drive, just the amount of people that came down. And I think the Bucks ownership has indicated, Peter, we're here, he'd be talking about, watching a Packer game, okay, from the comfort of this outdoor space, which has some heating in it, right? But it's all about having folks there around a real civic engagement layout. And it cannot turn its back on 6th Street. You have to have a presence on 6th Street. 6th Street's a major arterial leading into the African American area of town, but particularly Bronzeville, which is one of our major assets, and one of our major goals is leveraging development coming out of the Park East, up 6th Street. It can help MacArthur Square indirectly if we do the right moves on whatever happens on Kilbourne. But at a minimum, it has to have the type of presence that we envisioned when we put the Park East plan together in terms of the built environment that happens on those other blocks. It has to engage them. It has to be part of that fabric. If it's just a building, and I shouldn't say that because it's not going to be. It will be those things. It has to be those things. Those are things that we're working with management on right now, and they're very important. They're not only important to the city, but they're important to the Bucks. It doesn't work for the Bucks and that ownership group, okay, if this is just a venue where you have certain activities at certain times. This has to be a much bigger part of an expanded and vital Park East area and that immediate linkage to these other areas I spoke of before.
Gary, your experience at Turner Hall, infusing life into what's been a cavern there for decades. Would a streetcar running to the new arena, around the new arena, 6th Street, et cetera, would that do the trick of closing the gap between Wisconsin Avenue and the new arena, presuming it's in the Park East?
Well, I mean, I think the streetcar is going to help. And obviously, I hope that everyone in this room will realize that the streetcar is not an ultimate solution to our transportation needs, and that we need to have an expansion, not only an expansion of the streetcar, but we need to seriously look at the potential for light rail as it brings people in from the suburbs and also goes to our airport. And while we're at it, it wouldn't be bad if we updated our 1976 Cedar Rapids version of an airport also, since it's fairly horrible. You won't find cathode ray TVs in another airport in America, I guarantee that, unless you are in Cedar Rapids. But will a streetcar help? Yeah, a streetcar will definitely help. But to your earlier point about what do they need to do to succeed? I mean, learn. Kansas City, as you mentioned earlier, Kansas City's had tremendous success with what they've done. And even though I think Bruce Murphy, who's snidely been against any public funding at all for the arena, I mean, stated the fact that the people of Kansas City, that it's losing money, that area is losing money. He omitted the quote that Don Walker did in the interview that mentioned the fact that if they had it to do over again, they would guarantee to do it if they knew they were only going to lose $10 million because of the amount of revenue that it's brought into the city overall. I mean, I think they have to learn from what's happened out there already, and it's happened all over the country. I think they can do that. And lastly, I think they have to be held accountable because, frankly, the city's going to be putting some money into this, and I don't want my personal tax dollars going into another failure.
Greg, how important is the streetcar to the downtown and to these issues, would you say?
It's important. I mean, I think actually, I thought the Hunden report did a really good job of outlining why it's important. It builds on that connectivity, and but I hate to be so focused on it. I really it's driving me. We're so focused on the streetcar. It's $60 million of our money, which isn't a small amount of money. But let's face it, in the big picture, we're talking about billions of dollars of investment. We have a $25 billion tax base in the city of Milwaukee. It's one of so many things that we need to do. To get so focused on it, I think, is a mistake, and it excludes all the other things we have to do. So I don't want to. Yeah, it's important.
Rocky, quickly?
Just quickly, but it had to be focused on to get it through. It's not the be-all, end-all, and we've said that during the discussion. But the Hunden report is very clear. You have to have transportation linkages, and that helps us. To Gary's point, it's not going to be the only piece. We need enhanced bus service. We need people to feel that our walkable streets are truly safe and walkable, that they will actually do that. And as Hunden pointed out, we've got a little bit of a different issue. Kansas City is linear, and you're correct. I was recently there. We've got our downtown spread all over the place, so it can't be just done with the streetcar. It has to have all the other pieces. But I think we were focused on it because we needed to get it done. Now we need to get these other pieces. So I think, yeah, it's fresh in everybody's mind. But it's clearly, when I come to work in the morning, it isn't, I got to get the streetcar, somebody to talk about the streetcar. We've got to say the streetcar's a given now. We move forward from there.
And it will help in connecting the outside communities when we talk about Brownsville and also the southern part of the city.
Gary, did you?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think the mayor should be congratulated because I don't know how many decades we went without any other public investment into our county transportation. But, the ability to move some money at the time when the money was moved to the streetcar and separated and put back into our bus system was extremely important for us. When was the last time that we invested any money into our public bus system prior to that?
That significant amount had taken probably a long, long time.
Well, what's really important is that, like, for the common human who comes here on a convention, they would have no idea whatsoever how to use our bus system because it's so coded in such a way that, I mean, what route, whatever it is, goes. They have no. I mean, there's nothing relative to what you would find when you go to Chicago and you see a bus stop that lists where the bus currently is, that lists where the bus is actually going, and it's got GPS on it, so you know exactly. It's like I know where my Uber guy is when he comes to pick me up on my smartphone. But our bus system is frankly coded probably better than a CIA document.
If the arena is built and it does spur development in that area, is there a possibility in your mind that this will simply transfer economic activity from the 3rd Ward, Milwaukee Street, and other nodes? And do we need to protect against that possibility, or should we even care? Gary? Somebody's got.
Okay, I'll go. I'll take you off the hot seat for a minute. Well, I think that at a macro level, actually, I'm a little less worried because to the point that Rob made at the outset, there is this, the rising tide does lift all boats, and there is this inward migration into downtowns. And so I do think that we should be able to accommodate that and have the whole pie still grow larger. But that being said, it was not lost on me in his report and on the picture that he showed how important Wisconsin Avenue is, and we have to pay attention to Wisconsin Avenue because, it's a huge thing that people use, and it's a huge thing that people who come to our community that don't really know our community, they walk out the door of the convention center and they look around, and they're going to go. We have the opportunity to have them be great ambassadors, or people who show up on Yelp with 1-star ratings. And we have to take advantage of that opportunity, and we cannot forget Wisconsin Avenue. And I do get a little worried. We're very lakefront focused right now. We're very arena focused, and I worry about Wisconsin Avenue focus because it's obviously very important.
Anybody else want to add? Worried about that attracting too much attention?
I will. Yeah. I mean, I think it's extremely important. I think where this arena is being built, if they don't practice some sort of mirror development and consider the potential of impacting other areas of the city, such as West Wisconsin Avenue, such as MLK Drive in that area, and they just populate that space, I mean, it's a dangerous, dangerous thing because people are going to be getting out of the convention center and they don't let out, they're not going to be let out going in that direction. They're let out in that area around Greg's Hotel. So, I mean,
That's a good thing.
Well, I think it's awesome also. I know Jim Gaffing is very sad that you closed the water park, by the way. His family, which will be a family of 20 in like 5 years, will use it. But I think that also relates in a way. I mean, I think it's a bigger conversation that we have and that Rocky can answer a little bit about just development overall in our city. I mean, I am here, thank you, to what I would consider civic-related investment. I was talking to my friend Jeff Bentoff about this yesterday. I'm sitting on the stage today because really, who gives a shit about the guy that books concert tickets in town? But you know what? Because Mike Cudahy had civic-related investment, and he bought the Pabst Theater and lost money on buying it and then lost money for the first few years of owning it, I'm here to do what we do, and we've grown to become what we've become because Joe Zilber bought the brewery and was assisted by the city, and with a civic-related investment, we now have a beautiful space that's been activated in the city. Frankly, I'm sitting on a day-to-day basis in the city reading the Business Journal, reading the Journal Sentinel, stories about Rick Barrett's going to build a beautiful thing called the Couture on the lakefront, probably the premier space in our city of Milwaukee. But who's challenging Rick Barrett to build something on West Wisconsin Avenue or MLK Drive because he's being gifted with the greatest piece of real estate in the city? Frankly, for my money, I mean, that's not a real big challenge. I think any developer in this room would probably take that space out on the lakefront and use it. So, I mean, I think you have a whole list of properties, for example, on West Wisconsin Avenue, where you have a whole bunch of people who own buildings right now who are sitting and waiting for someone to come and do something exciting so they can all get rich. And frankly, that's not the type of civic-related investment that I think is going to help our city to get better.
Thanks, Gary. Thank you to our panel. Let's give them a round of applause. Senior reporter Rich Kirchen is here. The Business Journal will have a story this afternoon, and for those of you who have not read the Hunden report, we will attach the entire report to that story, so you'll be able to read it. Thank you very much for participating today.
There's no Q&A.